The call came at 6:47 in the morning. I was still in my apartment, half dressed for work, pouring coffee I hadn't asked for into a mug I'd had since college. My phone buzzed on the counter and I saw my mother's name. I almost let it go to voicemail. "I wish I had. Your father had a stroke," she said. No hello, no softening. Just that I drove to the hospital in 23 minutes. My brother, who lived 40 minutes closer, arrived 2 hours later. That was the first thing I filed away. My father didn't die that morning. He spent 11 days in the ICU, then moved to a rehabilitation facility in the same town where he and my mother had lived for 31 years. The house, a 4-bedroom colonial on Aldermore Lane with a detached garage and a half-acre of land that my father had maintained obsessively every weekend of my childhood, was paid off. Had been for 6 years. My father had told me that the same week he paid the final note, standing in the kitchen with a glass of bourbon, looking quietly proud in the way men of his generation do when they've finished something hard. He'd also told me something else that week, though I didn't fully understand it at the time. "This house belongs to whoever stays," he said. I thought he meant it philosophically. I was 22. I nodded and went back to my phone. I understood it differently by the time I was 31. After the stroke, my father came home with the walker, a medication schedule printed on 3 pages, and a cognitive assessment that the doctors described as mild but worth monitoring. He could hold a conversation. He knew my name, knew the house, knew where he kept his tools, but some days, the edges of things blurred for him. He'd repeat a question twice. He'd lose a word mid-sentence, pause, look faintly embarrassed, then find it again. My mother was 73 and had her own issues, a bad hip that she'd been putting off replacing for 2 years, blood pressure that required daily management, and a stubborn refusal to ask anyone for help with anything. She was the kind of woman who would sooner reorganize the pantry at midnight than admit she was overwhelmed. I moved back into my old bedroom 6 weeks after my father came home from the hospital. I didn't make an announcement about it. I didn't frame it as a sacrifice. I just packed a bag, arranged to work remotely 3 days a week, and told my supervisor I had a family situation that required me to be present. I drove to Aldermore Lane on a Tuesday evening and I unpacked into the room that still had the same blue curtains from when I was 15. My mother didn't say thank you exactly. She said, "Good, the gutters needed cleaning anyway." My brother called the following Sunday. "I heard you moved in," he said. "Temporarily," I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. "Good of you," he said. There was something in his voice I didn't examine too closely. A flatness. Like he was reading a line. "Let me know if you need anything." He lived 40 minutes away. He did not visit for the next 6 weeks. My sister lived in Portland. She called once a month, usually on Sunday evenings when the rates of guilt run highest. She asked how Dad was doing and I gave her the updates and she said things like, "That sounds really hard," and "You're such a rock for them." The calls lasted about 15 minutes. She did not visit for 4 months. Meanwhile, I was there. I was there when my father fell in the bathroom at 2 in the morning and I heard the sound through the wall and I got him up off the tile floor and sat with him while his hands stopped shaking. I was there when my mother's blood pressure spiked and I drove her to the urgent care at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday. I was there for every appointment, every refill, every form that needed to be filled out in triplicate for the insurance company. I learned which medications could be taken together. I learned the name of every specialist. I learned that my father slept better with the television on low, tuned to the Weather Channel, and that my mother needed exactly 1 cup of tea at 7 a.m. or the entire day went sideways. I became fluent in a language nobody teaches you. 8 months in, my father had a good stretch. 3 weeks where he seemed sharper, more present, more like the man who used to rebuild engines in the garage on Saturdays. During that stretch, he asked me to sit down with him one evening after my mother had gone to bed. He had a folder on the coffee table. He'd clearly been thinking about this for a while. "I want to talk about the house," he said. I said, "Okay. I've been thinking about what happens," he said. He didn't specify what happens meant. He didn't need to. "Your mother and I have a will. It's old. I wrote it when you were all still in school. It splits things 3 ways. I nodded. He was quiet for a moment. The television was off. The house made its settling sounds. "That was before," he said, "before I understood what staying costs." He looked at me in a way that made it hard to hold eye contact. "I want to change something," he said. "I want to do it right, not just talk about it." I asked him if he'd spoken to a lawyer. He said he had a name from a friend, a real estate attorney in town named Gareth Holloway, who'd helped that friend with a property transfer a few years back. I told him I thought that was a good idea. I told him to call in the morning. He called Gareth Holloway the next day. I drove him to the appointment 2 days after that. I sat in the waiting room while my father was inside for 40 minutes. When he came out, he looked tired but resolved, the way someone looks when they've finished saying a hard thing out loud. In the car, he told me what they'd discussed. He wanted to transfer the house into a living trust, one that named me as primary beneficiary and successor trustee, with provisions for my mother's care as long as she needed the house. The trust would also hold his financial accounts. Gareth had walked him through the mechanics. My father had understood everything clearly. He'd scheduled a follow-up to sign the documents. "I'm not doing this to be unfair to your brother and sister," he said. He was staring out the passenger window at the gas station we were passing. "I'm doing it because fair isn't the same as right. Not always." I didn't say anything. I drove. "Don't tell them," he said. "Not yet." I said okay. We went back 2 weeks later. My mother came this time. She'd known. My father had talked to her privately, and she had agreed. She sat next to him and signed where she was asked to sign. Gareth Holloway was thorough and patient and explained every clause twice. When it was done, the house on Aldermore Lane and the accounts attached to it were held by the Aldermore Family Trust, with my name on it in a way that was legal, recorded, and quiet. We went home and had dinner. Nobody mentioned it. The Weather Channel was on low. I want to tell you that nothing changed after that, that everything stayed peaceful, and the months passed in a gentle rhythm of appointments and meals and evenings on the back porch. But my brother started calling more often. They began gradually, once a week instead of once a month, then twice a week. The calls were warmer than they'd been in years. He asked about Dad with real seeming interest. He asked about the house, how the roof was holding up, whether the furnace had been serviced. Small questions that sounded like concern but felt like inventory. He started visiting too. 3 times in 6 weeks, which was 3 more times than the previous 8 months combined. He brought food. He sat with my father for long stretches in the living room, talking quietly. My father seemed happy to have him there. I was happy too, in theory. But I noticed things. I noticed that on the second visit, my brother went upstairs alone for about 15 minutes while I was helping my mother with her medications. He said afterward he'd been using the bathroom. The bathroom was downstairs. I noticed that on the third visit, he asked my mother, very casually, almost as an aside, whether she and Dad had updated any paperwork recently. My mother said she didn't know what he meant. He dropped it easily, like it hadn't mattered, but his jaw had tightened slightly before he let it go. I noticed that my sister, who called once a month, suddenly called 3 times in 2 weeks, and that 2 of those calls were to my mother rather than to me. I said nothing. I watched. My father had another bad stretch in November. The cognitive blurring came back, heavier this time. He lost 3 days, not dramatically. He was present and moving and functional, but something behind his eyes was set back further than usual, like he was watching everything from a slightly greater distance. His doctor adjusted his medications and said to monitor and call if anything changed. My brother came to visit during that stretch. He arrived on a Saturday and he hadn't called ahead, which was new. My mother was resting. My father was in the living room in the good chair, the television on, present but slow. My brother came in and sat with him, and I stayed in the kitchen where I could hear them without being obvious about it. The conversation was ordinary at first. Sports, the weather, how Dad was feeling. Then my brother said something that made me set down the dish towel and stand very still. He said, "Hey, I've been talking to a guy who does estate planning. Really good. I thought maybe we could all sit down together, you, me, Mom, and just make sure everything's squared away." My father said, "We've already handled that." A pause. My brother said, "Right, but just to make sure it's up to date. Things change. You want to make sure the documents reflect where things are now." My father said, "Things are where they should be." Another pause. Longer. Then my brother said, "Dad, I just want to make sure nobody took advantage of the situation." I walked into the living room. I didn't say anything at first. I sat down across from both of them. My brother looked at me and his expression went through 3 or 4 things quickly before it landed on something neutral. My father looked at me and then at my brother, and then he said, very clearly with zero blurring, "I made my decisions when my mind was good. Nobody took advantage of anything." My brother stayed for another hour. He was pleasant and normal, and when he left, he hugged my father and waved at me from the doorway. That evening, he sent me a text. It said, "Just want what's fair for everyone. I think we should talk soon." I didn't respond that night. I called Gareth Holloway the next morning. I told him what had happened. He said my father's decisions were made properly, documented, witnessed, and recorded. He said the trust was solid. He said if my brother wanted to pursue anything, he was welcome to try, but that there was very little to try against. He also advised me gently, professionally, that I should make sure I had copies of everything in a place my brother couldn't access. I already did. I had them in a fireproof box in my car. My brother called 3 days later. He said he wanted to come over and talk. I said okay. I texted my mother to let her know. I also called Gareth one more time and asked a few specific questions about what I could and couldn't say, and what documentation I should have visible. He came on a Thursday evening. My mother was in the house. My father was having a slow day resting in his room. My brother arrived with my sister on video call. She was participating remotely, which I hadn't been told about. He set his phone on the kitchen table propped against the fruit bowl. She waved from the screen. He said he wanted to talk about the long-term plan for mom and dad. He said he'd spoken to an attorney, his own attorney, and that there were some concerns about decisions made during a period of diminished capacity. He used that phrase deliberately. He was watching my face when he said it. I let him finish. Then I put a folder on the table. I opened it and I walked them through it the same way Gareth had walked my father and mother through it 9 months earlier. The date of the trust signing. My father's cognitive assessment from 2 weeks prior to the signing, which showed no significant impairment. The attending physician's notes from that same period. The witnessed signatures. The recorded deed transfer. The letter my father had written, by hand, dated, witnessed separately, explaining in his own words why he had made this decision and what he intended. I read part of that letter aloud. I won't repeat it here because it was meant for me and the people in that room. But I will tell you that when I finished reading, my mother was crying quietly into her tea and my brother was looking at the table. My sister on the phone said, "I didn't know about the letter." I said, "There's a lot you didn't know about." Nobody said anything for a while. My brother looked up eventually and said, "I'm not trying to take anything from you." I said, "I know," and I meant it almost. I think what he was trying to take was simpler and more human than that. He wanted the option to matter, the option to claim something, and somewhere along the way he confused that want with a right. "I was here," I said, "not to hold it over you, not to earn something. I was here because they needed someone to be here, and I was the one who showed up." My father appeared in the kitchen doorway. I don't know how long he'd been standing there. He was in his slippers and his reading glasses were pushed up on his forehead, and he looked between us for a moment, then walked to the table and stood beside me with one hand on my shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. My brother closed his laptop. My sister on the phone says she'd call back later, and the screen went dark. The folder sat on the table between us, every page in order, every signature where it needed to be. That was 4 months ago. My brother and I have a different relationship now. I won't say it's worse. It's more honest. We talk every few weeks and the conversations are shorter, but they're real. He visited last month and he helped me clean the gutters, which my mother had been asking someone to do for 2 years. We didn't talk about any of it. We just did the gutters. My sister came to visit for Thanksgiving. She stayed for 5 days and she slept in her old room and she helped with my father's evening medications without being asked. On the last morning, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "I should have been here more." I said, "Yeah." She nodded. We left it there. My father is doing okay. Not better, exactly. These things don't reverse, but stable. He has good days. On the good days, he makes the same coffee he's been making since I was 8 years old, and he reads the newspaper, the physical newspaper, because he never trusted screens. And sometimes in the late afternoon, he goes out to the garage and stands among his tools and runs his hand along the workbench, like he's remembering something he doesn't quite need to say out loud. The house on Aldermore Lane is in a trust. Every document is filed. Every account is protected. My mother will have what she needs for as long as she needs it. And when that time comes, not yet, not for a while I hope, things will go where they should go, to the person who understood what staying costs. My father told me that once, standing in a kitchen with a glass of bourbon, the way men of his generation speak when they've finished something hard. I finally know what he meant.